Hello everybody, my name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today I have another super important piece of advice to try to impart onto you, especially if you are a beginner or just getting your feet wet within sound design. Something that is a huge trap that I ran into for years, that almost everyone else I know runs into for years, is their concept and satisfaction behind the sounds that they make. Now, you might be in the minority and maybe you just, got sound design figured out like hella fast and you're just like, yeah, I know this shit and whatever. And okay, cool. But this is for the people that are normal, that have everyday struggles in the same way that I did. Okay, so you can unbutton your muscle shirt and stop trying to ask your wife for permission to watch this channel. So, with that being said, sorry, that was a joke in the Discord. What I want to talk about is the idea of really trying to own your sound. And if you are already kind of in the midst of figuring things out of how to make your own basses, how to make your own drums, how to do all that, one of the biggest traps that people run into is utilizing another reference track to compare, or trying to sit down and like make a snare and then listen to another snare out of context and be like, why doesn't my snare sound like this? And the problem with it is that it's a natural thing. I'm like rubbing my forehead just thinking about all the trauma that I went through to understand this. But the fact of the matter is that that isn't really going to help you, at least not in my opinion. Uh, and I guess if we're kind of being totally honest, those videos to where it's like copy the sound, and you've already heard me speak on that matter. I also don't think that's super helpful. What you need to do is, if you want to make a snare, if you want to make a kick, first of all, you need to understand what the aspects of making a kick are, right? You need to be shown a general process through some means or another. There's plenty of content on YouTube, whatever. I've got over 1,000 videos, and most of them are on sound design. Whatever you want to learn is probably already on the channel, to be honest, but I might not be the best teacher, and I realize that. That being said, you need to understand the mechanics of what it is that you're trying to shape. Once you have that, you kind of are only as good as you are in the moment. That's something that my instructor gave to me. That's something that I impart on my students as well, in the terms of tricking and martial arts and stuff. But having that understanding, there are just certain things that you are not going to be aware of that is going to hold you back from making things sound, uh, you know, on the same level or on the same page as your favorite sound designer or artist or whatever, right? Like, yeah, we're all using the same tools and stuff, but the difference between someone like me and somebody that is just beginning is that I've done this 50 billion different times. I have made all of these mistakes that now I teach these to where people don't have to. And the number one thing that I wish that I would have done is what we're talking about today, which is whatever skill set you have, if you're hell bent on making your own sounds, you need to make songs with your sounds. There's a degree of that, right? There's a scale. Maybe it's one sound, maybe it's a bunch, maybe it's whatever. But because we are working with a digital medium, it means a lot of things. If your drums aren't hitting as hard as you want them to, you can replace them. If your bass isn't as morphy or as whatever as you like, you can replace them. You can process them even further with distortion and all that other stuff or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are all these substitutes that we seem to forget whenever we're making stuff because we want it to make sense right off the jump. What you should be thinking about after you make your sounds, regardless of how much time you spend with them, is how do I apply this? And also, how do I use this as my toolbox to cultivate the more important part, which is songwriting or just arrangement in general? You know what I'm saying? Case in point, if you listen to a lot of video game music, a lot of those sounds are like insanely simple. But what makes them so iconic? I totally understand. And I might even come off as a bit hypocritical because in my genre, things are very specific and high demand with a high skill ceiling of trying to get the aesthetic right. But you have to go a little bit deeper and understand that you're only as good as you are where you are now, and that you're heading in that direction as opposed to what you are able to output. And it takes an honest look in the mirror to understand that. If you want to make neuro drum and bass and you're struggling with your neuro shit, like, I get it. I struggle with that for years. I still struggle with it. And I've been producing for over 10 years, but it's never going to come together until you start owning your own stuff and you start believing in your own sound and you start utilizing that to, I got a sneeze coming up here in a second, but oh shit. Another one. Sorry. But yeah, like it's never going to come together because you have to put the practice in and the time in, you know? And one of the things that I did that was really lame that I wish that I wouldn't have done is I would make a bass, do nothing with it, and then make another bass, and then make another bass. And I do that with kicks, and I do that with snares, and I do that with, you know, all this other stuff. And it took me so much longer, I feel, to get to the point of where I'm at now, which I still struggle, by the way. But I'm much more happy with, you know, candidly designing a very quick kick and snare or something in the means of doing whatever and using this as a placeholder, right? So very quickly, if I'm in the concept of like, yo, I need a kick. I don't need a perfect kick. I need a kick, right? And I do something as simple as this to where I just kind of maybe go super basic, grab this, send this and the noise, and then I will go to the matrix, and then I will go here. And this is probably not the best tool to show you in because it takes way longer for me to do this in here than anything else, but it's okay. We just don't tell anybody, okay? We need to go to the LFO1. We'll change this to global main tuning, and we need to make this super fast, and then we will set this to the pitch. Maybe. Pitch. Oh, it's already there. Duh. Sorry. Great. Okay, cool. You'd be amazed with how far you can get. And the other thing too is like sometimes some stuff is so simple and so stupid that it's not even worth designing. When I first started making music, like I was looking for that perfect kick. I was looking for that perfect snare. I already had such expectations and such taste, such whatever, that I did not allow myself to make music because I was looking for the perfect thing. You'd be amazed how far you can go. And this is why I'm saying, like, if you're not that great at sound design, not to sweat it, because with just a little bit of understanding of your tools, you can go from something like this. I already know that this is going to sound at least better. Something like this to something like this. Great. All right. Now we've got a kick that I absolutely spent zero time on, and it's already okay. It's okay, right? It's a little bit better anyways. If we want to take this a step further, we can clip this some more, turn this on, maybe use the fuse compressor. You know what I'm saying? And make different versions or variations of this, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? And the thing is like if you're so caught up in this shit, then you're going to be so caught up in every single other thing that follows along with this. You know what I mean? Just take it for what it was. Back it up a sec. Turn this stuff off. Maybe turn that up a bit, but... And then just use that. And once you have something like that, you can make a mental note of, this kick sucks. You know? This is garbage. Whatever. And over time, you'll start to learn how to actually make this turn into something that you like a lot more. I would know because I started here. This is how I started designing kicks. And now whenever I make kicks, they sound a little bit bigger. Right? But the thing is if I make a track like this and, you know, I try to expose the core concepts of what matters to me, which I'll talk about in a second. In theory, before we go any further, I understand this, and all I have to do is say, those suck. And now look, yay, you just replaced the sounds. If anything, I've talked about arranging and making stuff in silence to where if you double click, you can just utilize this and create an arrangement. If I were to turn this off and I create this pattern with this metronome, what beat is this going to make? You could probably tell from that, right? If you have any kind of musical inclination whatsoever. And so it's not rocket science. I'm not talking about anything that's like a revelation or whatever, but we understand that it doesn't take a lot for you to actually get something going. And if you're not super caught up in being all high-browed, stuck up nose, whatever, like I was right from the get-go, then just utilizing basic things can get you and get your track going very quickly. If I utilize something like this very fast, and I go delay, maybe make it a little bit higher, we can even like clip it, right? Okay, sweet. Look, I've got fundamentals of a kick and a snare. Does it sound like shit? Of course. But in that same way, what does this beat sound like? You get what I'm saying? And so because of that, we can start to build off of that. And then you can even use anything. But when it comes into expressing myself in the same way that I would with my kind of music, none of this matters unless if I know how to start building a track with the same kind of arrangement skills that I normally would. And what I mean by that is doing things like this, right? When it comes to beat making, making something that is a little bit off time, even if it's very simple of one thing is off, kind of like so. But now I can start to utilize this to create the same kind of vibe. Let's say I wanted to make something that's like kind of boom bappy, right? Boom, pa, boom, pa, boom. I don't know, something like that. Wait, what? Oh, it's already kind of vibing, right? Oh, my drums don't hit hard enough. Whatever. Okay, cool. Calm down there. Just toss them in something like this. Learn what a drum bus is, right? Do something like this. Maybe something even like this to where we can understand what it's like to, move things a little bit early, right? Did I do that on both? I did. Man, this snare sucks. It's so stupid. Okay, well, let's replace it with something else. Or dare I even say, what happens if I utilize this to layer, And now we've got something to where it's not one sound, but two sounds. I have done zero mixing, by the way. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but you know what I'm saying? I have just added a little bit more to this, a little bit more context, because I know that this still needs to be here regardless of what it sounds like. Now we can get into shaping it and messing with it, but you see that I'm solving multiple problems now. Does that make sense? In the same way that I'm using this with other things, I can use, a regular sounding kick perhaps, and take away all of the transients or whatever as I get better to say, okay, well, at some point or another, this might even become useless. But the cool thing about it is that we're still just practicing. And that's what this is. You know what I'm saying? This is all just practice, 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 practice. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. But practice helps you get familiar with identifying problems and then learning how to solve them more efficiently. Assuming, you know what I mean, you're exploring for that intent and purpose. But, you know what I mean? With this whole entire beat, okay, that's kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? So we can grab another hat now and we can create some kind of shuffle, but it doesn't matter what these sounds are. You know what I'm saying? It's something that we're utilizing in which to serve a higher purpose, which is, are you trying to be a scientist right now, or are you actually trying to make some music? And in my case, and what I care about anyways, it's always been about the music for me. Because if I'm not making music, then like, what am I doing? I'm not a sound designer for games. I'm not, this wizard that, and nor do I feel like I need to be. I'm just trying to get to the sounds that I care about because they relate to the genre. But you can still make your genre without having access to the sounds, just at a more basic level, The thing is like, especially with my genre, quote unquote, halftime, this is something that, sounds like hip hop. But if I have more aggressive sounds and I swap these out for a heavier palette or whatever, then the transformation aspect of it becomes like a Pokemon, right? This is the fucking Charmander version that we're doing. and you need to start at a Charmander version. No, you need to start as a Poke Egg and walk 10,000 steps or whatever, how long it takes, and then make your music in the Charmander stage. And as you get better over time, you will evolve into your Charmeleon, and then you'll evolve into your Charizard, and then you will go beyond and figure out, different facets of the evolutionary stage as opposed to just 3 levels. Just bear with me, right? Understand that the mountain continues to get higher and higher. But when it comes into throwing beats together and all that, like, yo, at the end of the day, we're still throwing beats together. I guarantee if I sit down in the studio with, someone that I admire, Cage, Chi, Zane, hell, Copycat, Frequent, who else do I know? Hudson Lee, Zayaku, my friend Brian, whatever. Like, you know what we all do? We drag a kick in and we put a snare down somewhere in this region here, somewhere between here and here with our kind of music. You get what I'm saying? Like, and the better that you are with creating concepts and rhythm and musicality and chords and all that other stuff, or even talking about what I was discussing with the remixing stage, right? Getting to the sounds and getting better at practicing the contextualization of what it is that you make as opposed to focusing on what you make or the timbre of what you make, then that's going to make you a better artist overall. And in fact, if you embrace your imperfections, and you over time sharpen your tools, I think is the best way to discuss it, then you will find yourself in a completely new playing field for everything that you do. I hope that makes sense. I know that this is kind of like beating a dead horse, but again, this is just something that I've learned over time that is kind of liberating and giving yourself permission to do. If you go watch a snare tutorial and you make something as stupid as this, if you can see the big picture, sorry, this, right? Like, that was so stupid. Anybody could do that, but you see the big picture, but you can still, do the beat crafting and whatever, then you're starting to like have 2 levels, right? Think about it like 2 faders. So right now, you're designing this much and using this much of outside sources, but over time it'll kind of like even itself out. And then if you're like a masochist like I am, then it will go like this and be like this much. I don't even recommend doing this, to be honest, because it'll drive you insane. But now I'm using all of my own sounds, barely any, if any, sounds that I either didn't make on the spot or like made at a different time, or they were like, samples from someone else. But that's how you get into this. If I can give you any advice, it would be to try to do this as much as possible if you were trying to get into sound design and all that other stuff. It's important to practice the sound design. I get that. But it's just as important if you are someone who makes music to use those things in a musical context and just write sketches if you can't write anything else. I can't tell you how many stupid basses I've made that I've given up on a project because I was like, man, this bass sucks. I made the whole project about that bass and I gave up on all that work I just did because I couldn't find the right phrase. You know what I'm saying? There is an argument to be said about, when shit's not working. We should talk about that perhaps in another video. But you still want to challenge yourself in these growing stages to be like, I'm going to make something stupid. Like, who says that you can't do that? Nobody. Nobody except your ego when you look in the mirror before you've had a coffee and brushed your hair and your teeth. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to allow yourself to enjoy that stage again. And if you can get into that stage to where you're not so focused on the quality and the output, you will have a much better time writing music, and it will keep its sense of fresh and fun than getting into serious mode like I get into all the time about being like, okay, it's time to cook. I got to make a banger. This sucks. Blah, 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 whatever. Oh, my snare's not hitting. Oh, it's not good enough. And I start like stacking all of these criticisms and problems on top of myself that I have to be really valiant and disciplined and hard-headed, and like my spirit has to be so charged for me to overcome those when they start to stack. I wonder if it's an inevitability. I also wonder how I would be if I embraced this advice from the beginning and what my artistry would look like. No matter what you do, you're going to have an artistic struggle. There's no way around that. I'm sorry. It is what it is. That being said, maybe the artistic struggle that you will have, thank you for the follow, that you will have will be less severe or your problems will be an evolution of how far we've come in music production and technology together, right? Um, yeah, I apologize. I probably just babbled a bunch, but I can't tell you how important this is to me and how crucial, rather, it is to be about yourself from the get go as you're building, you know. The more that you try to embrace the artistry and all that stuff. And yeah, I get it. You can't help but look up how to sound like Noisia. You can't help but look up, how to make sounds like Chi and stuff, because those are the things that inspire us the most. But what I have talked with him and many other people about, and my approach whenever I have done lessons with people like them, is I want them to teach me, or I want to become an artist and make music not like them, but make the music that makes me feel the same things as I do when I listen to those people. And that is a very different thing. Like, yeah, of course, like I'm all like halftime and, whatever and all that other stuff. But that's because I enjoy the beats of it. That's because I enjoy the groove and the vibe. And there's something to be said about that. But I don't want to sound like them, at least not exactly, right? I don't want to, we've already got them. We don't need any more. We don't need someone to take their place. And you shouldn't be trying to. The world already has enough Cohen sounds. There's only one, by the way. And we don't need more because they already put a stamp on there. What does your stamp look like? That's what you want to find from the beginning. If you're really about your music, if you're really about your sound profile and all that other stuff, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's kind of the spielberg on this kind of advice that I have, and take it for what you will. You feel free to agree or disagree, but it's my philosophy on how to just enjoy the journey more while not getting too wrapped up in, you know, it's like when you're playing basketball, but with small children and the goal is 6 feet. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to be as fun from if you first look at it, or maybe it will be because you're a terrorist and just like dunking on people and small kids and knocking them down and making their parents hate you. But I wouldn't recommend that. It wouldn't make you a very good person. But if you put those handicaps on in that way and you're like, you know what, I am going to shoot this basketball from further, or I can only score when I hand it to, I hand it to the fifth grader or something like that. Or I'm going to pick them up, let them dunk it. Like you have these different things that change the dynamic, but it's still basketball. I know that seems like a stupid analogy, but you change the rule set of understanding what you have in the moment, because again, you are only as good as you are in the moment, versus where you want to be, or how, like what level you aspire to become, which is a level that you might not ever reach. Not to say that you might not go past it. You might reach the same level, but on a different plane, but you might not end up being making the sounds or making the music exactly how you imagine from the very beginning, because our imaginations usually don't work like that, right? And that's okay. Like, let it go. The more that you let stuff go and you just focus on creating, the more honest it becomes. Believe it or not, which is like another hard pill to swallow. And oh, dude, we'll talk about that another time. But anyways, thanks everybody. I appreciate you all listening, and hope that, I've given you a little bit of insight and permission to use shitty sounds and not worry about it. Just have fun at the end of the day. Remember, you do this because you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, do something else. Straight up. Much love, guys. Have a great rest of your evening. Check out alchemy.com for my sounds. I also do lessons. Join the Discord. There's a link in the link tree in the description. And I'll see you in the next one.